Welcome to this explainer. When we think about World War II, we usually picture massive tank battles, Pacific naval armadas, or just those standard textbook dates that try to neatly box up the deadliest conflict in human history. But today, we're looking past those dates. We're going to deconstruct the explosive, highly calculated, and honestly often misunderstood sparks that actually ignited this global inferno. We're going right back to the very beginning to see exactly how the world was pushed, shoved, and literally tricked into war.
Let's kick things off with a question that seems pretty straightforward, but actually unravels a bizarre web of espionage. Who actually fired the first shots? If you had walked up to a regular citizen in Berlin on the morning of September 1st, 1939, and asked them what was going on, they'd tell you that Polish insurgents violently attacked a German radio station overnight. They firmly believed the German army was just defending its borders against unprovoked aggression. But history tells a very, very different story.
To really understand what happened that night on August 31st, we need to talk about a concept called a false flag. Simply put, a false flag is a complete deception. It's a staged event designed entirely to make it look like someone else is attacking you. It hands the aggressor the perfect manufactured excuse, a casus belli, or cause for war, allowing them to strike back while playing the victim. And Nazi Germany was about to pull off one of the most infamous and theatrical false flags in modern history to justify their impending conquest. The sheer theatricality of what's now known as the Gleiwitz incident is honestly chilling to look back on. Under a highly classified project called Operation Himmler, German SS officer Alfred Naujoks led a squad of operatives, all dressed up in Polish military uniforms, to violently seize a local German radio station in the border town of Gleiwitz. They broadcast a short, aggressive, anti-German message in Polish to make it sound like an invasion was underway. But to sell this lie to the international press the next morning, they needed physical proof. So the SS brought in murdered concentration camp prisoners, who they horribly referred to as canned goods, dressed them in Polish uniforms, and just left them at the scene to look like casualties of a fierce border firefight.
If there was any doubt about this being self-defense, Hitler's own words completely shatter it. Just days before the attack, he explicitly told his top generals, "I will provide a propagandistic casus belli. Its credibility doesn't matter. The victor will not be asked whether he told the truth." That quote is absolutely crucial. It proves without a shadow of a doubt that the war in Europe was not a spontaneous defense, but a deeply premeditated offensive. He knew the international community might see right through the radio station attack, but he just didn't care. The lie only needed to hold up just long enough to get the panzer divisions rolling across the border.
So how does a fake border skirmish explode into a massive diplomatic crisis? That brings us to Section 1, exploring the impossible ultimatum and diplomatic sabotage.
When you look at late August 1939, you see that peace didn't just slowly erode. It was systematically dismantled in a matter of days. On August 23rd, Germany stunned the world by signing a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, totally neutralizing the immediate threat from Moscow. 6 days later, Hitler corners Poland and Britain with an impossible ultimatum. 2 days after that, the fake radio attack at Gleiwitz happens. And, literally the very next morning, the real invasion begins. It was a perfectly choreographed countdown to destruction, proving that diplomacy was nothing more than a smokescreen for military deployment.
But why Poland specifically? Well, Hitler had actually been laying the groundwork for this since 1938 through the Danzig crisis. He demanded the return of the Free City of Danzig, a mostly German-speaking port managed by the League of Nations. Geopolitically, he also wanted an extraterritorial road and railway through the Polish corridor to connect Germany to East Prussia. German propaganda pushed this territorial grievance so hard they even secretly paid a French fascist writer to publish a prominent article asking the French public, "Die for Danzig?" The whole goal was to isolate Poland and convince the West that this local territorial dispute was absolutely not worth a world war.
Now, looking at the August 29 ultimatum, it's pretty clear it wasn't a real negotiation. It was a psychological trap. Britain and Poland saw this 24-hour deadline to send an envoy with full signing powers to Berlin as totally absurd and practically impossible. But for German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop, that was exactly the point. He wanted the clock to run out without a meeting. When the Polish ambassador finally managed to show up without those full signing powers, Ribbentrop just coldly dismissed him. This calculated move let German state radio falsely broadcast to the world that Poland had definitively rejected generous peace proposals they hadn't even been allowed to fully read. Having manufactured their perfect pretext, the trap was sprung. Let's move to Section 2 and look at the grim reality of the explosion itself,
the September Campaign.
53. That's the massive number of Wehrmacht divisions that violently poured across the Polish frontier at daybreak on Friday, September 1, 1939. The diplomatic games were finally over, instantly replaced by the roar of artillery and the scream of Stuka dive bombers. It was a lightning advance from the north, south, and west that just completely overwhelmed Poland's fiercely outgunned forward defense lines.
This invasion, famously known in Poland as the September Campaign, wasn't just some standard military conquest for territory. It was immediately recognizable as a brutal, coordinated war of annihilation. Regular military units worked hand-in-hand with specialized SS task forces, carrying out ruthless orders issued long before the invasion began. Their operations involved the targeted, indiscriminate murder of Polish civilians, intellectuals, and Jewish populations, horrifyingly prefiguring the systemic genocide of the Holocaust that would soon engulf Europe. Vastly outgunned and facing total destruction, the remaining Polish forces strategically retreated southeast, desperately waiting for the military support that Britain and France had promised them.
But, as we know, that Allied relief never truly came, and the situation was even more hopeless for the defenders than it initially appeared, because Hitler didn't act alone. A secret protocol hidden right inside the Molotov-Ribbentrop Non-Aggression Pact literally carved up Eastern Europe into distinct spheres of influence. Germany took the West, and the Soviet Union laid claim to the East. So, on September 17th, acting on this dark agreement, the Soviet Red Army swarmed across Poland's nearly undefended eastern frontier. Caught in a crushing vice between two massive, ruthless military machines, the country was swallowed whole.
So that covers the European ignition of 1939. But what if we zoom out globally? That brings us to Section 3, where we examine the pre-sparks.
September 1939 is the date we all memorized in school, right? But in reality, the fires were smoldering way before Gleiwitz. A lot of historians actually argue that the true spark in Europe was lit back in 1938 with the completely failed Munich Agreement. By letting Germany carve up Czechoslovakia in the desperate name of appeasement, the international community basically guaranteed that Hitler's territorial aggression would escalate into a world war. And here's a pretty surprising historical irony. Poland actually participated in that 1938 partition of Czechoslovakia, annexing a disputed border region themselves. It just goes to show how incredibly complex, opportunistic, and fractured the geopolitical landscape of Europe truly was before the main global conflict even kicked off.
But what if we look even further back and shift our focus entirely to East Asia? In 1931, the Imperial Japanese Army invaded the resource-rich Chinese province of Manchuria in the Mukden Incident. China immediately asked the League of Nations for help. But the League? They completely lacked the political will or the military force to do anything. They essentially just wrote a condemning report and accepted the invasion as a fait accompli, a done deal. This early failure proved to expansionist nations everywhere that the international community was completely unwilling to use actual force to stop naked aggression. The blueprint for 1939 was undoubtedly written in 1931.
And we definitely have to consider the skirmish at the Marco Polo Bridge in 1937. This intense clash over a crucial railway route leading to Beijing marked the official start of the Second Sino-Japanese War. For the millions of people living in East Asia, the horror of global conflict, the massive troop mobilizations, the devastated cities, the aerial bombings, none of that started in September of 1939. It started right here, 2 years earlier. Because of this massive scale of warfare and suffering, a growing number of modern historians consider this 1937 clash as the earliest real spark of the truly global conflict we now call World War II.
The invasion of Poland was undeniably the match that finally blew the powder keg wide open in Europe, but we have to remember that the powder had been carefully, deliberately poured for nearly a decade across multiple continents, fueled by appeasements, secret pacts, and unchecked militarism. So I leave you with this to consider. If local skirmishes in Asia became massive wars years prior, if diplomacy repeatedly and catastrophically failed in Munich, and if violent false flags were flown long before the first German tanks crossed the Polish border, when did World War II truly begin? Thanks for learning with us, and we'll catch you on the next Explainer.